Hello and welcome. I'm Mohammedali, the spokesperson and Director of Media and Communications at IOM. I'm here in Sudan traveling in the car with the Director General Amy Pope and the Chief of Mission Mohamed Refaat. Today is our third day into DG's 5 days visit. As I'm riding with the DG and the Chief of Mission heading toward Khartoum, DG is the first UN principal to visit Khartoum since the beginning of the Sudan war. In this podcast, we will hear from the Director General Amy Pope and the Chief of Mission Mohamed Refaat about the situation and what they are witnessing on the ground and what they believe the world need to do urgently to protect civilians, deliver life-saving support, and help Sudan to begin the path toward peace and recovery. Director General, thank you for joining this podcast while we are on the way. You have been meeting families and doing field visits to Afad camp, where many families have been displaced and arrived from Fasher. What are you seeing there? What you have seen and what the people have told you?
So, over the last week or so, about 90,000 people have been rapidly displaced. Some were already displaced that were living in camps in Darfur, and those camps came under attack. Some were actually living in the city, and they described an extraordinary attempt to flee to find safety. I spoke to groups of women who spoke about having to crawl on the ground to avoid being shot at by drones. They spoke about the long walk they had to take from Fasher to Afad, which took many, many days. They described that people who couldn't make the trip were left to die, and those who were walking down the road would see dead bodies scattered throughout. I met one woman who had a 5-year-old daughter who had some pretty serious health issues. Her brain was swelling. At some point over the last several months, she had sought emergency surgery at a military hospital. They had to make an incision in her brain to bring down the swelling, and they had to make an incision in her abdomen because of the fluid buildup. The little girl was clearly deeply affected and had a difficult time concentrating or paying attention. She was very, very skinny, and her mother had carried her all the way from El Fasher. Her biggest concern was to find a way to make the mid-December hospital appointment they needed for her follow-up care. So the level of need is really horrifying, and the trauma that mostly women, girls, older people, children are experiencing is really inhuman.
Director General, Sudan is the world's largest displacement crisis. What that looks like in real terms for you, given that you are visiting Sudan, and for those displaced and for the humanitarian workers who are trying to reach and help, what do you say to that?
There are a couple of issues, and first and foremost, it's that we need peace, right? Unless there is peace, unless the fighting stops, unless civilians are not targeted, people are going to continue to move. And we see that if we look at a city like Khartoum, where there had been mass displacement at the beginning of this war, and now that the city is more stable, people are starting to go back, starting to rebuild. IOM was the first office to reopen in Khartoum, a sign that we assess that it's time to go back in and to create a foothold to rebuild the city. But in places where there's still ongoing violence, people are moving, and they're moving time and time again. So first is peace. The second is just resources, because when people need shelter, when they need hygiene or protection or food, all of that costs money. And this is one of the most significantly underfunded humanitarian crises in the world. And particularly when you look at the scale of need compared to what we have to offer people. So peace, access to communities who are in need, and then of course the resources to make sure they have what they need.
Mohammed, the chief of mission here in Sudan, Mohamed Refaat, you are seeing many people return to places like Khartoum, Sinnar, and Al Jazeera. What do these return tell you about the resilience and the determination of the Sudanese people in the wake of what is happening as well in Fasher and the displacement that is taking place at the moment?
Thanks, Mohammed. Let's first say, what is resilience in Sudan? From day one I arrived in Sudan, I have seen that the majority of the effort actually done on the humanitarian side was taken by Sudanese. Millions and millions of dollars have been paid by the Sudanese diaspora, by the local communities, to open local kitchens and to support host communities and to host more than 50% of the displaced population in Sudan. Just as we came out of the camp now, we have seen that the communities is telling us we don't need food. We have enough food for 1 month because the local community have donated a lot of food for us. Of course, they don't anticipate the new arrivals, which we anticipate as we have the data that there will be thousands of people coming and there will be more and more needs. But this is basically what's resilience in Sudan, that the locals have been holding together, hosting communities. And the UN and the humanitarian actors have been hugely supportive, but with the resources that we had, it's very, very little that we can continue doing if we don't have more. As we see returns, they give us hope. And this hope was very symbolic when in the camp, as we spoke, as I was listening to the stories from those who have been sexually assaulted, violated, traumatized. This came like a 5-year boy and asked me for shoes because he wants to play. This gave me the hope that even in the darkest moment of Sudan, families and children still have hope, not only to return, but to maintain a life that's full of happiness and dignity. And this is our role, to be with them, to support them in safe, dignified return, to have services where they are returning to. So we maintain a most reliable and resilient return.
Thank you, Mohamed. Back to you, DG. You've mentioned the global support and the need for that. You've called for collective action to stop the war and support recovery. What kind of international response is needed now to match the courage of the Sudanese people?
Number one is political. As I said, unless there's peace, unless there is an end to the fighting, a ceasefire to enable humanitarian access, people are going to continue to suffer, and they are suffering in huge numbers. The world can't give up as this conflict continues, as so many people, more than anywhere else in the world, are being displaced, are not getting enough food, or not getting basic needs. So that's first, and that you just don't see that happening at the level that it needs to happen, and it's absolutely critical. The second, of course, though, is just building awareness about the situation here, building awareness about the needs. I mean, we're talking to people who many times are well educated, had access to good jobs. Interestingly, I've met many migrants who were stranded during the war because they came here in the first instance looking for education and opportunities because this was a place where you could find it. So understanding the crisis, the complexity of it, understanding the impact of climate change on communities that are already vulnerable, understanding the level of resources that exist here and the opportunities for the people of Sudan, we really need a comprehensive approach that's really thinking about the future.
Thank you. The crisis in Sudan is largely underfunded. It's just like only 30% funded. And half of the population of Sudan is really living in urgent humanitarian need. What message do you want to send to donors and the international community in terms of stepping up the efforts?
Number one is that an investment in Sudan is more than just an investment in this one country. Sudan, before this war, was a place where many migrants passed through, or where many migrants ended up as a destination point. We're now seeing, unfortunately, many Sudanese show up in Libya, people who have not been able to find safety, not been able to find resources where they are. And like all conflicts, when that happens, people keep moving until they find what they need. So to recognize that this is not just about one country, it has a regional ripple effect, and it can have a much broader global effect. So the investments here are critical, not just to manage the current humanitarian situation.
Mohamed, the Chief of Mission in Sudan, what are the most urgent needs at the short term as well as at the long term in Sudan, and what IOM is offering at the moment?
We definitely need more of the shelters for those who are immediately being displaced every hour as we speak. As we met with them over the last period, those people have been living in houses or places in Fasher, and now they are living on the bare foot without anything in hand. And this is basically number one need for them. We need shelter. We need to feel safe somewhere. And of course, as we go from there will be the massive health needs and the gaps in health and education. Definitely, we hear from them that they have been starved over the last 18 months, and they feel that now they have reached areas where they can finally look at food and see that there are meals being prepared. I think we, as I am looking into not only the elements of the new displacement that we see over the last couple of weeks, but we are also looking into those who have returned, have to provide for them basic services when it comes to health, education, safe water for drinking. And those are areas where we are focused currently, like how to maintain and save lives when it comes to the humanitarian urgent need, and how to sustain solutions for the long displacement that we are seeing in Sudan. Being one of the agencies that has promised Sudanese to deliver, and we have been very highly appreciated and valued, as we have seen through this trip.
Thank you, Director General. The people of Sudan wants what every family wants: safety, dignity, and a chance to rebuild their lives. From here in Sudan, I'm Mohammedali. Thank you so much for listening and for standing with the Sudanese people. Thank you.